And a lot of professional turners still, they'll change the tool rest and the banjo with the lathe still turning. I still like to keep the safety tip, turn the lathe off when you make adjustments. A little bit of sapwood, and we still have a flat spot, so we'll take a little bit more off the outside. And that's the outside rough shape of the bowl. We'll turn it around and we'll core a bowl out of the inside. As this dries, it's actually going to shrink widthwise and not shrink as much lengthwise. So it'll end up being a little egg-shaped when it's done. And typically, so basically this is the equivalent of milling lumber. Instead of milling flat boards, I'm gonna mill this to 10% of the diameter. So this is about a 13-inch bowl. I'm gonna make it about 1.25 inch thick sidewall, and then it'll be kicked aside to dry. I got rid of that little bump, and then I'll remark my center for future use. This lathe, brand new, I think is around $6 grand. This particular chuck is probably somewhere around $350 to $400. You know, so you gotta end up with chucks of multiple sizes. Usually the lathe comes with a faceplate. So there's many ways of mounting all the hardware, or mounting all your bowls. So I've got 5 different chucks that I use, and I still need more. And typically when I'm in the process of doing these, rather than switching the chucks, I'd probably turn 10 of these to this shape, then I'd switch chuck over. Then so you just, if I'm doing a multiple run, but we'll just set up this one, and so reverse mounting it, and we'll get ready to we'll core another bowl out of the inside of this. The old shop teacher always said inside diameter should not exceed outside diameter. And there we have another bowl. And I probably could have gone a little deeper on that, but that gives you the idea how this whole system works. And actually there's a pretty good bark inclusion there, so we're probably gonna, when it's all said and done, we're probably gonna lose a little bit out of the top of the bowl, or you fill that with filler. And that is one rough turn bowl. So this is fresh cut. I'm not sure when this tree was actually cut down, but it was probably within 2 months ago. You can still see literally water on the surface of a fresh cut. As far as I know, this will max out any moisture meter. So this is beyond 40% moisture in it. At this point in time, I would rinse off the loose shavings, because it doesn't matter, it's already wet. I'll let it just air dry to the surface, and then I will coat it with sealer. There's different products, Anchor Seal, man-made products, pretty much any PVA glue, Titebond, Elmer's. You want to seal the end grain to stop that moisture from coming out. Typically, if you're going to let it air dry, so I would put sealer on it. You can put it in a paper bag. I do multiple, put them in a cardboard box, or you can put it in a kiln. If you're gonna let it air dry, rule of thumb is a year per inch of thickness. So this isn't most like lumber because you have such in-grain exposure. So this bowl will actually be dry in more like 9 months to a year rather than full year or 14 months because it's a little over an inch thick. Put it in a kiln, it can be 6 to 8 weeks, and this is good to go. As you use a moisture meter, I pretty much wait to see that if I put it in a kiln, I wait to see that there's absolutely no moisture coming out of the kiln before I even bother checking. And a lot of times, even when I see no moisture coming from the kiln, visually, a lot of the pieces are still at anywhere between 15 and 10%. If I keep the kiln going for another couple of weeks, keep in mind I have a low temperature kiln, I'm only up to about 115 degrees. It'll take another several weeks to go from that 10 to 15% to get it down to 6 or 7%. Here in Southern Oregon, pretty much air dried, you're only gonna get to 10% anyway, because that's pretty much our ambient average moisture. I've had pieces sitting around for 10, 15 years, threw a moisture meter on them, they still read 10%. I haven't played around with that same piece to see what it reads in August versus February. I'm sure there's a little bit of change, but not a lot. Once the tree moisture is gone, that is the true tree water that leaves the wood. Once that water's gone, the wood is dry. Ambient humidity will allow that wood to expand and contract, and right now the grain is running this way in this bowl. As this bowl dries, it's going to shrink more to the width than on the length. So right now this bowl is about 12.5 inches in diameter. There's several flaws. There's a little crack here, there's a bark inclusion here. This crack may continue. This may not be a really good viable bowl when it's done, but I would anticipate this 12.5 inch bowl will shrink to about 12 to 11 3/4 wide, and it will stay, right now it's 12.5, it'll probably still be 12 3/8, 12 1/4 once it's done. It may not even shrink at all due to the width, because as it collapses in, it'll actually push out. So you want to leave the sidewall thick enough so that you can secondary turn this and still get a round piece. I'll turn a foot here and I'll turn this away, and I'll make this about a 1 inch or 3/4 inch bowl, and then you actually could have a nesting set. So these will get sealed up and probably go in the kiln on the next batch. As a wood turner, backyard salvage is where I get most of my wood. So backyard trees, there's usually metal in them. Some kids built a tree fort. God, I don't know how many trees I desecrated in my lifetime. Fences, signs, clotheslines. I even found a corkscrew in a limb 12 feet off the ground. Or a corkscrew removal. So you never know what's going to be in a tree, but there's always the natural flaws. Like I say, you see this, there's a crack here. That could have started out as a bird peck. It just created a flaw in the tree, and it healed and scarred over. Just created a little bark seam. So there was already a natural crack in the log to begin with. So that's, as a wool turner, it's really hard to find a 6 inch thick, 12 inch, 14, 16 inch square block of wood without a flaw in it. So if there is a flaw, I usually highlight it. In fact, with these cracks, I'll actually fill it with turquoise, copper, brass. I'm on the fence of highlight it, don't hide it. If you fill it with sawdust, you can still see that it's a patch. So if it looks like, yeah, you tried hiding it and failed, I'd rather highlight it, use a contrasting color. If the cracks are really bad, I also will put in a dovetail key. So that dovetail will keep that crack from moving any even farther. The opportunities and options are endless. A new wood turner, buy the biggest lathe you can afford. You can turn little things on a big lathe, but you can't turn big things on a little lathe. Someone beginning out is work with the best quality wood you can find, because natural bark inclusions and cracks and pits and pockets, due to the centrifugal outward forces, pieces can explode. So until you get the experience of anticipating what a piece could do, yeah, start small, work your way bigger. Also, keep the RPM at a sensible RPM. I've seen a lot of t-shirts that say life at 3,800 RPM. That's ridiculous. My rule of thumb for turning is diameter times RPM should fall between 6 and 9,000. So an example, a 10-inch diameter bowl should only be turning at 900 RPM. This was a 12.5-inch bowl, and I was turning around 700. In fact, I had it about 700, which is a little faster than I really needed to. You can see how quick the shavings were coming off. The higher RPM does not equivalent a cleaner cut. It just simply means quicker removal. So if you have a problem, it's gonna happen faster. So no reason, formula of diameter times RPM should fall somewhere between 6,000 and 9,000. So, or you take 9,000, divide it by your diameter, that'll tell you your RPM that you should be turning at. Professional turners who are in for production and wanting to remove that wood quicker, sure, if you have enough, your piece is solid, it's not gonna go anywhere, you can start bumping the RPM up, but keep the RPM safe. Sharp tools, sharpen often. This particular bowl, I actually used 2 different bowl gouges. Both were sharp. So if I was using one gouge, I probably would have turned the outside, sharpened it, cleaned up the inside. Also, it depends on if there was dirt and bark pockets. If this was still a log with bark on it, most likely by the time I got the bark off, I would resharpen.